Welcome to the HuskGuys podcast. Oh, yeah.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the HuskGuys podcast, the first one of 2024. I took a little bit of time off in between the offseason or the end of the season, and now we've got plenty of excuses of why we haven't, but we're back on it, and we've got a ton to cover from an offseason Kool-Aid drinking, unbelievable amount of content to cover as far as the offseason championship that we are steaming towards right now. We're pumped to bring it back to you. Before we kick off, as always, a word from our sponsors, which is just us, the HuskGuys store. If we die, we die. We've got some good stuff. We've got hats. We've got cool Omaha gear. Andrew's rocking some of the newer stuff. This is the year Omaha stuff. Pipeline Jerky. Make sure you go to pipeline-jerky.com and support the boys up front. And with that, Andrew, how are we feeling in the new year?
Oh, man. I mean, it's good to be back. It's been, for being an off season, it's been an incredible amount of emotion, and there's an incredible amount to consume. Like, you thought the season ended, and God, we just hit the ground running. There was no break. There's no break. There was no like, okay, here, you get a few days to just rest your brain from Husker football and recover. No, it just got off and running, and excited to talk about it.
The thing I wanted to start with, because I was thinking a lot about this as we were kicking this thing off, is how much healthier I am in the off season. Like I've always said this over and over again.
Physically, mentally,
all of it.
Emotionally.
Yeah.
Spiritually.
I think that I always say this, and I've tweeted about it tons of times, I love the offseason. I love everything about it. I love the recruits, the transfer portal, the new coaches, the drama, like everything that happens. But I've also realized very personally for myself, like I'm healthier now. Like I put on 10 pounds during the season of just stress eating and just stress eating and not sleeping and feeling terrible and anxiety and all this stuff. And now all of that's like been cured.
Don't blame yourself for that.
And now it's like I'm exercising every day. I've lost that weight. I feel great. My energy's at all-time highs. I feel like fantastic.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. I was just kind of looking at like the balance of 2023, and I was like, for 9 months of the year, I'm pretty healthy. 3 months of the year, just I'm a mental head case. I'm a disaster. I'm an anxiety mess. And now I feel great again. So I think we're back. That's what I'm feeling. That's where from a healthy standpoint, I think we're all the way back.
I mean, your health is an analogy for Nebraska's season in 2023. I mean, it started with so much hope, and then, the wheels kind of came off towards the end. And your year came off the tracks towards the end.
All of it.
But in January, hope springs eternal.
Hope springs eternal. Yeah, it's like New Year's resolutions, but it's also,
new me.
It's like new year, new me, new year, new Huskers, all of it. But I've realized at a very deeply personal level, I was like, God, that you just really let yourself go towards the end of the year. Just deep depression, 4 straight losses. All the hopes and dreams are gone. You have to watch all these, like even the bowl game, the entire season just pisses me off.
Yeah, you're just stressed.
The whole thing bothers me.
Of
like, you're like Minnesota's playing in a bowl game. That pisses me off. You got to watch Iowa play in a bowl game and not score the entire game. That pisses me off. Couldn't score.
Didn't even bother.
Like all of it, just every aspect.
Score a point.
I don't even enjoy the bowl season because I'm like, we didn't make a bowl. It just pisses me off. But then now that it's all behind us, God, I feel great again. All the way back. So that was my top of the hour, like healthy side. I was like, God, I feel great. Why do I feel so great? It's like, because I'm no longer miserable about all of the terrible things.
You just got to flush it and move on to the healthier parts of you. There's so much to look forward to. And every bit of news that drops that gets the hope and the hype rolling again, it's like a hit of dopamine. Like you can't. It feels like you're winning a game in the off season, and there's no real feeling like that.
Yeah,
because there's no actual tangible ramifications or anything. Well, you land a recruit and you're like, we just won another game.
But I think the difference in the offseason is it's a constant build of hope, as opposed to like every week during the season, there's the stark reminder every Saturday that we're just like not that good yet. of like,
Yeah.
but during the off season, it's 9 months of just like rising up
Gradual
to the
build.
right, just like a slow build. And there's no reality check of like, actually, you guys are not that good. Yeah. But speaking of rising, little irritated. Maybe you wear a funny shirt. But one of the things that, we have not done a podcast since, what I think is the most important consequential recruit in the history of Nebraska. Is that fair to say? Dylan Raiola
is. I would say it's either him or Sue. And Sue was
he as big?
Was a 5-star. He was a 5-star recruit, but he
Yeah.
came into the wrong team.
Yeah.
And so he was part of, one of the best recruiting classes we've ever had.
Yeah. Sue was a good call out. I was going to say like Tommy Frazier, but
the circumstances were different. And so I would say that Raiola takes the cake as like, this is the most impactful recruit we've ever signed.
Ever.
Yeah. You're coming off of a losing season and you're coming, but because Sue was back in like, Bill Callahan, he should not be named, was horrible. One of the worst humans to ever walk the planet. And I don't think that's stating it enough. But he could always recruit. And Sue came in at a great time, but just to like the worst defensive staff ever. And I guess like the tide at that time though was still like he came in, I think he was a 2005 recruit.
Mm-hmm.
And that class was our best recruiting class ever. But the years preceding that was like, okay, we're not exactly like totally out of the national spotlight or anything at that time. You're a couple of years removed from appearing in a national title, and emphasis on appearing because that's about what we did against 2001 Miami.
Yeah, it's a fair call out. I guess I had seen some people say, since Tommy Frazier, but like to me, Tommy Frazier was the icing on the cake that pushed us over the edge, certainly. But that team was freaking awesome. This is we're 5-7 coming off, and you signed the number one recruit in the country coming off of a 5-7 bowl-less season, and changes everything, which I think we can get into. Is that then the ripple effect of the players that then want to come, the wide receivers, the running backs, the linemen that then want to come as a ripple effect of that I just don't think Sue necessarily had that. Like Sue was obviously the best defensive player we've ever had, but didn't have that like ripple effect of, okay, now I want to come.
Right.
Exactly. But here's where I want to start, because we haven't had the opportunity to like break this down, is the timeline and the drama that unfolded following the loss to Iowa, leading up to the signing period of Dylan Raiola. Because I think the context of this is crazy, and it's like one of the wilder periods we've had. I think we finished the season, very obvious, pretty unanimous. We need a new quarterback.
Yeah.
I think it's Jeff Sims pretty quickly went into the portal, and
no one even noticed.
And he
it was
hasn't.
It was like
January.
He was there. He didn't have to make an announcement.
Yeah, January 26th, and he's unclaimed and has had seemingly no vested interest in the guy.
That is so sick.
Feel bad for him. Chubba Purdy also in the portal.
He went to Nevada.
Yeah, he went to San Jose State, then Nevada. Clearly, not what I would say not necessarily a Power 5 quarterback. And then you've got Harburg still on the roster. Great kid, probably closer to a tight end than the quarterback. But the context being, everybody unanimously, we need a QB. Yeah. And days were going by, weeks were going by, and the portal exploded. Of every good player in the country essentially hit the portal. And I've got the list pulled up. You've got Kyle McCord, you've got Will Howard, Dylan Gabriel, Grayson McCall from Coastal Carolina, Riley Leonard from Duke, Tyler Van Dyke from Miami, Will
and
Rogers
all of them
from
were coming to Nebraska at one point.
Well, that's the hope springs eternal. Is you're like, oh my God, look at that's 7 5-stars I just listed. Will Rogers, Brock Vandegrift, Blake Shapen, MJ Morris, all of these guys, Cam Ward, DJ Ungale from Oregon State, Dante Moore. That full list, every one of them is in the portal. Yeah. And then over time, one by one, they're getting pulled off. And, Dylan Gabriel signs with Oregon pretty quickly. Grayson McCall goes to NC State. Riley Leonard quickly goes to Notre Dame. Tyler Van Dyke goes from Miami to Wisconsin. So I was sweating. there's, I think, a dozen quarterbacks went off the board by the time we seemingly were doing anything.
Yeah. But I think the thing that was great to see was, I mean, Rule made all those statements and stuff as well. Like, hey, here's what a quarterback costs in the portal, and Coach probably getting mad at him for like resetting the market entirely. They're like, oh God, why did you just put $2 million on this guy? Now this guy wants $2 million. But that was a truthful statement, and I think that it kind of also put on alert, like, hey, Nebraska's in the market, and we're going to go out and get somebody. And they were flying to visit Cam Ward. They visited with like Will Howard, and then when Kyle McCord came to campus, I think the Husker Nation was in a complete like frenzy. It was like, oh my God, Kyle McCord's coming, and he's bringing Julian Fleming. And like,
I was in.
This is it.
I was in. I mean, I think there was weirdly a divided fan base on Kyle McCord, which I thought was weird because he went 11-1 at Ohio State, and it's like, why would you not want that guy? Like,
so good.
He essentially broke like almost every Ohio State record, or broke a ton of them. I mean, he's certainly not Justin Fields, and he's not, some of the quarterbacks that they've had in the past. He's pretty darn good. And he's on campus, and I was into it. I was like, great. Like, we need a quarterback. And if we had like a competent quarterback from this year, we would have won 8 games. And so I was in. But that's what I'll never forget is I was following his visit, and he had shown up on, I'm pretty sure it was Monday morning. Now I wish I would look this up. But it was like a Monday morning, and he's like, throughout the day, they're like, he's having a good meeting. They had pictures of him. He's putting Husker gear on. I was like, this feels really good.
Then they projected him to Nebraska on like the second day of
all projections. While he's there, he's going to sign before he leaves.
Crystal ball was to Nebraska.
Crystal ball, but it was also like he's going to sign.
And so was Julian Flemings.
And so was Julian. They were both there. And like, if you remember, in the middle of the day,
my brain was exploding.
If in the middle of the day, though, the news like just started to hit a little bit. Raiola's thinking about, he's uncomfortable, and that hit. And I remember it hit, and it was like a little bit like, okay, Raiola's thinking about it, and like the Raiola context is crazy because he's flirted with us for 3 years. And essentially has like,
it's just like,
it's sort of like just like abusive relationship where he's like, I'm thinking about Nebraska as a sophomore. You're like, oh my God, we're gonna get him. And then he goes to
just don't do this to us.
Yeah, he goes to Ohio State, and then he decommits from Ohio State, and he's like, Nebraska's back up there, and you're like, he tried to come, and then he goes to Georgia, and so like it was almost like we'd done this cycle a few times, and I think people were like, wait, is he? Because he was down in Georgia, he moved his whole family to Georgia, and they were about to start off-season practice. So I think there was an element of like, okay, he's unhappy, sure, got it, but like we got Kyle McCord on campus, and then within like an hour, that story just like
it got some legs.
I mean, it just started accelerating, and it went from like he's unhappy to like he's made phone calls to like, I mean, all of a sudden then the big guys started jumping in, and like the major recruiters were jumping in and talking about him. And the context, which was crazy to me, of like picturing Rule sitting there with McCord as this story explodes, and him having to be like, hey, like I would love to know how he actually handled that. Of like,
remember me.
Well, but even like Rule sitting there with McCord being like, so I got this call.
This guy we really like.
From another guy who has
teased
us. He has teased us and turned us down 4 times.
It's not your fault.
And I know you're sitting here and I know you want to sign, but also.
So, I guess that is one of the interesting parts of it was that other teams have done this before. Including, like Tennessee this year with like Joe Milton on campus, and then Iamaleava, however you say his name, as like their future. Yeah, Nico. There we go. That's a little easier. As their quarterback of the future. You've even had teams like Georgia that are, they've got their guy this year, and then they're projected, whether it's Vandegrift or Stockton or whatever, their guy of the future. And I don't think Raiola wanted to play that game, but there was a potential scenario where McCord signs and Raiola signs.
Incredible.
And you say, hey, McCord's only here a year. He's an NFL quarterback. He's coming in. You're going to redshirt, and you're going to learn under him. And so we went from like 0 NFL quarterbacks to 2 first-round picks.
Yeah.
To 0 again.
0.
Briefly. And then
yeah, I mean, that's a good point because we had that day and then that week was so insane because you had 2, and then McCord that's what was so wild about the McCord trajectory was like at noon, he was a Husker and was about to get on the airplane and sign, and then like was done with it. And by like the time he got on his flight, he was like, I'm out. And like they released a statement.
It turned out
like,
then too that he wasn't out. We were out. Like that we never even offered him.
Yeah, the whole thing just exploded but it was all within like hours. It was insane.
Yeah. And his dad, it turns out, might be insane.
Crazy guy. Yeah, crazy
tough.
dad.
That's a tough look for Kyle when your dad is affecting your draft stock.
Not great.
That's
not
good.
But the rest of that week,
stay at home, Dad. Just like don't come.
The rest of that week, though,
I'll call you after the visit, but just like you kind of.
If you remember, then like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday was like Raiola watch, but we had nothing. We had no quarterbacks, and all of those quarterbacks I was talking about were also getting pulled off the board. I mean, during that week, Grayson McCall went off the board, Riley Leonard went off the board, Brock Vandegrift went off the board, MJ Morris went off the board, and you're sitting there like, I think we're gonna get Raiola, but also if we don't and we didn't get McCord, like, oh my God, we have just
what is the plan?
We have just royally dropped the ball in a million different ways. And like I just remember the temperature heating up like crazy, and like people were going nuts. Mm-hmm. And then, Donnie Raiola went and saved the day.
Oh my God, the best alleged move in recruiting history is to go and just barnstorm your brother's house and say, I'm camping out in your house. The story, Husker Nation, is allegedly that on a little family visit, Donnie Raiola pays to Dom Raiola to prevent Dylan Raiola from committing and meeting with other coaches, basically camped out in his brother's house, camps out in Dom Raiola's house, and hangs out there for a few days on a quote-unquote just visiting family, just hanging out. Oh, by the way, this is the number 1 most prized recruit in our program's history, and my job might depend on it, but I'm just hanging out. And so anytime that Kirby Smart was going to ring the doorbell, Donnie Raiola was going to be there in his boxers answering the door saying, excuse me, we are not available right now. No soliciting.
Well, but they can't. That was like the alleged loophole in the system, was that you can't have multiple coaches visiting at the same time. So
and they had one visiting constantly.
He just was there. Like Georgia can't walk into the house.
Visiting 24/7. He was just like sleeping in their driveway.
I think it's a fantastic story because I think that's what we've been texting about. For those who don't know, we are brothers. Andrew and I are, and I would do the same thing if either of your twins and I was coaching.
100%.
I would not. I'd be at your house starting at age 16 through 18. I would just be like, these guys are coming to play for me. Like that's what's so insane about the whole thing. Is like
I would petition the state. I'd be like, these parents are unfit. They're not sending their kid to Nebraska.
Like Simon and Charlie. Simon and Charlie are coming. They're coming to my school. Especially he's a coach there. I'm glad he finally did that.
Dom played there.
Yeah, I just feel like he, it was some of it was like awesome move, but some of it was also like, what have you been doing the last 3 years? How did you not get this guy who looks up to you as your godfather to commit to your school when or maybe he knew the whole time. I don't know. But anyway, long story short, what a week that was, because the added to what I said at the top of my health and anxiety and stress were so bad. That was part of it. I didn't sleep that whole week. I was like, did we screw this up? That single decision, which I think we can get into, changed the entire trajectory of, I think, Nebraska football. I don't even think that's hyperbole. I think that's truly like the domino effect of that move. The wide receivers that now want to come,
Yeah.
The running backs we were able to sign, the linemen that are starting to come, the entire different offense that we were able to get, the quarterback coach that we just signed, all of these different pieces. I don't think Kyle McCord has that kind of a ripple effect by himself. I don't think any of these players that we listed have that kind of ripple effect. But when you have an 18-year-old that has the talent that he has and is the number one player in the country, that to me is like, I mean, it's the biggest signing. It's the biggest story of the offseason. And it's, God, I mean, you do that in December. How do you, the offseason title is just locked up.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely true. Because like, if you think about the amount of players and the impact players, like let's say Raiola ends up, getting tragically hurt or something, which would be a totally Nebraska thing to do.
Yeah, but let's not talk about it.
But you take all these other players that came kind of as a domino effect, or possibly a domino effect, and you've got Raiola kind of acting as a peer recruit. Like the domino effect that they can then have, I think, is like he's basically just the first domino, and then everybody else kind of like falling in line is. I want it to work out with him, but like let's just say in a hypothetical terrible scenario he gets hurt or something, you still are bringing in all these other players that are like believers, and then they buy into the rule culture, and then hopefully others kind of come with them. I mean, in signing week we had several big flips that came. Bricks was already in, and he had probably been in for a while, but that's a huge recruit. He was the last week in November too.
Massive.
Absolutely massive interior O-line right out of Iowa's backyard. Sorry about it. Vincent Shavers from Miami, Tarver from Miami, Amari Sanders, two cornerbacks from Miami, and then Jordan Ochoa just signed last week as well. And then you get into the transfer portal, and all your skill positions are just going up, up, and up.
Yeah.
Those are
Dowdell's exciting.
Fact that it's like I don't know who's going to be throwing to you, but if you've got now Jamal Banks is in, and now Nair is in, and now you've got Dowdell at running back. Those are the domino effects that I think you're saying, okay, this is where one impact player coming in can change the trajectory of a program if these other guys are falling in line.
Well, I think that was the big piece was, after we got Raiola, then it was like, okay, who's he going to throw to? Like you kind of realize you're like, wait, we don't, that was such, a position of need this year where you've got Coleman and Lloyd who are just young, and Fedoni is great. But I think that was kind of like the next piece of anxiety. But then it's almost like Rule has filled every one of these gaps that we had of like, hey, we need wide receivers. Like, oh, cool. How about Jamal Banks and, Isaiah Nayor from Texas, right? How about two big dudes, both 6'3" and up, both with playing experience, the Power 5 experience, both really good players, both highly recruited coming out of high school. Check. And you add those guys to Coleman and Lloyd. That's a pretty good, that's some good depth on the wide receiver side, and it gives Raiola someone to throw to.
Yeah. I am a big fan of what they've done so far. So, Coleman and Lloyd obviously is the good young stars, but you also have incoming freshmen. You've got Devon Hall, Isaiah McMorris coming in, and then you add Jamal Banks. He had 59 receptions, 653 yards, 4 touchdowns in 2023, and he had 42 for 636 and 9 touchdowns in 2022. He's 6'4", 205. Isaiah Nayor, he was a star at Wyoming, unfortunately coming off a couple injuries. But then you also have IGC and Washington coming back too. So now you've got this room that's a couple guys coming off of injury, a couple guys coming from the transfer portal, and a couple young stars, and a couple that are other freshmen that, your depth is looking as good as it has been in some time, I think, there at wide receiver. Bring in Carter Nelson. He's supposed to be more of like a gadget type player. He's going to be an absolute stud, whether he's a tight end or there's been whispers that they might use him like Deebo Samuel. I didn't even realize just how athletic this guy is.
See that? I don't know. That's a little dramatic. He's too big for that, but he's a good player.
He's wicked athletic. But regardless, you've got some weapons. And then they bring in Mazkua, interior O-line from Florida. I mean, this guy's built like, it's like an RV, just like parking an RV on your O-line. He's
big boy.
340 pounds. 6'5".
Yeah, Raiola's done a heck of a job. This is now Donovan Raiola has done a great job recruiting. I mean,
yeah,
he's been able to build in the sense that we haven't had a ton of transfers. He's built some really strong guys. He got some. I mean, we haven't had transfer out. We've had some good transfers in. Got some really good recruits. I mean, I think it gives you a lot of hope that if he can steady that line.
Yeah, and I like not to harp on it too much, but let's just go back to the time when we all wanted Donnie Raiola fired.
Yeah.
And Matt Rule said, you know what? The only assistant I'm keeping on the staff is Donnie Raiola. And we all said, okay, what the hell are you thinking?
Yeah.
And I mean, look now. So he's been one of our best recruiters. He literally camped inside of the top recruit in the country's house to bring him in. He's bringing in O-line players, and the O-line, I feel like actually is improved as well, like just as a unit from a coaching standpoint. So Donnie Raiola, shouts out to him, like, for sticking it out. Husker Nation wanted him dead. And
we just with Husker Nation,
we're eating our words.
I think we're so broken as a fan base that, like, you know, you just sort of just constantly need to fire someone over and over again for 20 years for just like something like that. Just for whatever reason, that's just become the immediate, like, why just fire someone, you know, and like, it's not a way to build a program. Someone. Yeah. It's just like, I don't know. You think about any other line of work where you just like get fired every year just for like, they just boo them and, you know, but I think, it's proving to have a little bit of stability. I mean, the stability side, I guess, that to me, I hope starts to play out here in year 2 and year 3 of like, there's so much chaos throughout college football right now with, you know, Saban just left, retired. Harbaugh just went to the NFL. You've got DeBoer, who's gone from Washington. So they need a new coach. Like that chaos that then creates, you know, Alabama just lost 25 players to the portal.
Yeah. I mean,
overnight.
2 playoff teams just lost their coaches.
Yeah, and then Michigan's about to get their roster raided by the transfer portal too, because Harbaugh left, and Washington is
wait a second, 3.
Yeah, and DeBoer, all 3. Yeah, 3 out of 4. And then there's so much of that going on that I guess like that's where as you start to go through this, and I'm thinking about where we were last year when, you know, he was kind of scrambling to put together portal players and sort of bridging the gap between, you know, Frost players with Mickey Joseph's players with these players. It's kind of encouraging. They're like, all right, we didn't have a ton of transfers. We got a lot of guys coming back. We got a lot of good portal players that have come in. So I think it's, you know, at that level, I think having like even 1 year of stability in the modern day college football is like, I think it's going to help so much.
Yeah, I think that the timing on the Rule hire, like, also can't be, you know, understated enough. Like, for us to have this last year and then go into this next year with some recruiting momentum and that stability in a time where literally the entire alignment of every single conference is getting blown up and changing and everything. You got all of these different coaching carousel hires and stuff going on right now. I'm just glad to like not be a part of that and instead be just completely focused on our off-season title run.
Yeah, I do love a good coaching search.
Yeah, it's true.
We've been a part of some great ones, you know, and you know the thrill of seeking a new coach. The thrill of seeking a new coach is also great. Yeah. But in the true context of building an actual team, I mean, have you been following? Follow like what's happening in Alabama and Washington and stuff. Like it's January 26th, and they're down. Both of them are down 20 starters. It's like, how do you know? It's late January. You missed the entire recruiting period. You've missed the entire like everything, and
we're like,
we're getting ready for spring ball, and these guys don't even have any players on their team. I'm sure they're going to be fine, but like, I don't know.
Or Alabama.
The new rules are crazy. And Michigan's about to lose all their players. Late January, you're about to lose all your players. Like, what a terrible time to lose half your roster.
Yeah, I mean, I hope they do, but but also sorry.
No, I love it. Yeah.
No, I think the biggest thing that is like reassuring me though is that, you know, we were never going to get like all the top stars and everything, but I think we are getting the best players that are going to play the right roles here. Like we're plugging areas of need, and you can totally tell on what they're recruiting. We had 8 out of our 25 freshmen, maybe it's 26 now, but are defensive backs, and that's like one of our biggest areas of need. So they're plugging that area. They're just kind of starting young there. Quarterback, check. Offensive line, other than Maskua, we're bringing in a great crop of young freshmen as well there, and we're returning a good amount. Like even Benhart recommitting was like huge to get him to buy back in.
Yep.
And then wide receiver, like those are probably I would rate those as our top 4 needs: defensive back, quarterback, O-line, wide receiver. Arguably getting like some more edge rushers and stuff would be probably up there as well next, and still is a possibility. But regardless, I think that's what's exciting me is that it like we're seeing things the same way as the staff. And then the final thing would just be our coaching staff. Pretty much anything to take the pressure off of Satterfield would be seen as a positive.
Yes.
And so we just hired Glenn Thomas this last week. Dude that comes in with a lot of experience. A lot of experience. Like he developed a bunch of different quarterbacks, including Matt Ryan in the NFL. He's had his hands on PJ Walker. He had Charlie Brewer was up for the Davey O'Brien Award. That was back when he was in Waco as well. That was with Matt Rule too. He's got connections. He just came back from the NFL as well. And I think he's essentially hired. I would love to go like behind the scenes with, what went into the discussion with Dylan Raiola, Tom Raiola, Matt Rule, Satterfield. Like, did they say, you guys need to bring this in, a quarterback coach in, or did Matt Rule basically make that decision and say,
yeah,
you're going to come here and we're going to hire this? Like,
they're all connected somehow, right? What's like the lynch?
Yeah,
because he's connected through Baylor, but he also knows the Raiolas somehow.
Coached at Temple and Baylor with him.
Yeah, but doesn't he have some? He has some connection to the Raiolas too, in some capacity.
Raiola went to Nebraska. Did you know that?
Well, right, but I thought Glenn Thomas had coached Raiola in some capacity, in some quarterback camp or something like that. I thought maybe I just made that up, but regardless, I mean, you take the pressure off him, and then the other guy you're not mentioning is Holgerson, who's Dana Holgerson, who was allegedly on campus. The people have pictures of the back of his head, and some people are saying
he's looking great, by the way.
Yeah, he's got a buyout allegedly.
The flow is as good as ever.
February 1st, that he might be coming on as an analyst in some capacity. I'd love him as an OC entirely, but understand that he's, for whatever reason, like Rule is really doubling and tripling down on Satterfield, which is sort of interesting. You got to figure he's probably got 1 year to be like, all right, you've got a generational quarterback. If you screw this up, you're gone type thing. But even regardless, you add the experience that Thomas had, and if Holgerson truly comes, that's some great experience to help, Raiola to learn the game. And I don't think, I think from a Holgerson standpoint, you think about why he'd potentially be interested in this. He just got fired. He made a bunch of money. But does he come to Nebraska without Raiola? Does he come without Rule? Or do you go because you're like, well, this is the opportunity to groom and develop like the number 1 quarterback in the country?
I mean, he's the best. He's one of the best offensive minds, like in the game.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I
mean, his offenses are always fun. I was disappointed because I went down. I immediately went down a Holgerson rabbit hole. I thought he had coached the West Virginia Pat White teams, Steve Slayton teams. He didn't.
No,
that was a while ago.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, that was different. I was like, oh my god,
but it's
this
okay.
Guy coached.
His West Virginia teams had some decent offenses.
They're still awesome. But I was like, if he's like replicating the Steve Slayton, Pat White offense in Nebraska,
everybody loves those days.
I mean, forget it.
Steve Slayton, good lord. Throwback.
Oh, so good.
No, even going back to his time, like at Houston and everything.
Good teams.
He's had offense has been his identity, and so having him as a quote unquote analyst on the staff, even if you get him because he's a guy that you get him for 1 year, maybe 2, like if you're lucky. And this was always the Alabama plan as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, what if we become?
Sarkisian was an offense analyst with Alabama at one point.
So
and now he's a head coach at Texas. So that's
Lane
the
Kiffin
idea.
Well, I think for any of those guys, that's what's like. I would love to become. Now that Saban's gone, and like, what if we become the new the coach rehab place, right? Like Lane Kiffin went to rehab himself.
Should we just bring Saban in?
No, but dude, like all these young coaches.
He could retire in Lincoln.
You remember how like he basically? So he said Lane Kiffin went through there, and he went through rehab there, and like Sarkisian went through rehab there, and like all these coaches become Bill O'Brien.
You should choose a different word. I think he actually went through rehab there.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I'm going for
coaching rehab as well.
Coaching rehab. These guys get fired. Sarkisian was a miserable disaster at USC. He got fired. He went to Alabama and now
Washington. He went to Washington.
Well, he started at Washington. He got fired from USC, and then Saban picked him up after that. And then he went. It's like then he was like he went through Saban's program.
The Saban School of Broken Coaches.
Yeah, Bill O'Brien fired. Now he's the offensive coordinator back at Ohio State. Like he went through the Saban school. I mean, I would love for Rule to be like that guy. And the more I see Rule too, he's got a great ability. I mean, obviously he's a fantastic public speaker and orator, but like his story is cool because he's able to talk about the NFL and failure and what it's like to fail. I think that story really resonates with players of like, I've coached in the NFL. I also know what it's like to fail. I know what it's like to succeed. Like I feel like he's got a really good like balanced story to tell. And maybe that works for these coaches too, to be like, all right, this guy, he's in college. He also coached in the NFL. Like he can help me catapult to my next thing. Anyway, it's cool. It could be interesting.
Yeah, I think it's nothing but good things for Nebraska. Like you get a guy like that to just surround your other coaches with another, whether he's broken or not, like another great head coach is not a bad thing to just have patrolling your sidelines.
I think especially since like all of our coaches now are so young.
Yeah.
Like across the board. I mean, we're just young across the board. That I think having.
I mean, even in like Glenn Thomas, he's been around for like almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
So that's just another way of like beefing up your staff,
But we got like
knows as well, of course, but
like babyface wide receivers coach. We've got Satterfield. We just are so like young across the board. It'd be good to have some experienced eyes on the program. But
yeah, no doubt about it. And I think we've got a lot to look forward to in the off season. One of my favorite quotes and stuff so far, like one of the big things that keeps the off season hype train rolling is like every time you see a quote about like, it's always something like hard work and like nothing can keep us down and like I'm a lion and like that just gets the hype.
So good.
It's like gas for the tank a little bit. It's a rule at this coaching forum the other day. Leaders are the ones who sprint forward and have everyone follow, and you sprint out into the unknown. You sprint out when it may be a little bit dangerous. You're the guy that walks out there first.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, he's like Jesus. You might as well just say, was this from the Bible or Matt Rule's mouth? I don't know.
He's the master. He's got the "if we die, we die." He's got his sound bites.
So good, and that keeps me going. But we've got a lot to look forward to in the off season too. I mean, you cannot understate the photos and videos of lifting sessions that are going to come out of winter training. When that happens, and like it's one of the only times a year where a bunch of adult men are like groveling over like, oh my God, this guy put on 10 pounds. He looks great.
He really thinned out.
You're like, this is a little weird, but everyone's commenting on, Nash Hutmacher's body. And that's a great time. The spring ball clips are coming. The spring game is announced for April 27th. Get your tickets. And then, I think the other thing that you sort of dread, but I guess look forward to is, there's going to be some decommits during and after spring ball when that next transfer portal period opens. We might bring in, but overall, like we are over the scholarship limit. And so I'm interested to see like how that goes. And then of course, summer camp. And that's when we just crown ourselves the title winners again. And that's the layout.
So good. We're like Aren't we well over?
Yeah, we're over. I think we have a hard time saying no to people.
Yeah. Well, that's what got a little weird is we had no players transfer out. There's only like two
At
or
some
three
point,
players.
we do have to say, "Oh, we're breaking every
Yeah.
rule."
I mean, it was like there's like 2 or 3 players transferred, and we had like 15 transfer in. You're like, and a full recruiting class. Like, I think we gotta. I don't think they can all
so
stay
far
here.
we haven't been hit with that devastating transfer. I did want to keep Chubba Purdy, I would say, just to have some experience to fall back on again. Like we were on our third and fourth string quarterbacks this year. Like
It's gonna happen. Yeah.
Like it would have been so. But Purdy's out. Kalen stayed in. We lost like Taman Lynham, Baron Miles, Jake Applegate.
Yep.
There's a couple more that were kind of buried on the depth chart there, but we haven't had the big oh my god, the world is over.
Yeah, like
the carpet has been
Nash
pulled out from
Hutmacher
below me or something. Yeah, like that would be brutal. But that's the thing that I think is keeping so much hope and hype around Rule is that somehow last year he managed to get almost the entire team to buy back in.
Yeah.
In the year of a coaching change after another bowlless season. This year, you don't go to a bowl again. We've barely seen any transfers. And in fact, we're bringing in more people, and we're bringing in one of the biggest freshman classes we've seen. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of that is I guess what I probably had hoped we were going to do last year. And so I don't know, it's almost like, not that we're a year behind, but I guess I always think when a coach comes in, I'd love to have just year one be with 65 freshmen type thing, just give me 65 freshmen and then you're going to stink for a year or 2 or 3. But by by year 3, you're going to be freaking awesome because all these freshmen have started every game of their careers. I don't think you can build a roster that way in the modern day portal era. I think in the modern day era, there's no promise that any of these guys will be on your team in 3 years.
No.
But I do think we are moving a lot more youthful. And I think if you build that foundation with freshmen and sophomores, I think I think we're we're still probably a couple years away from it being really, really strong. Even look at what Michigan built, that took him a long
super
time.
Interesting. Yeah, well, even in the McCord, going back to the McCord and Raiola saga, Rule said in a presser, he was we made a program decision to basically not end up offering McCord, and I think because at that point knew that Raiola was coming, they were we're going young.
They build
we're gonna build this thing up. I mean, we're gonna go with a freshman, and that's insane. But just because of the transfer portal, and because these guys can all be one and dones if they want to.
Yeah,
I think that he's already proven that players are buying back in, which is crazy, but it's working so far.
Yeah, I think a lot of this too it'll be interesting which of these strategies wins out. Ohio State right now, there's a rumor going around, and all of these NIL things are always unsubstantiated, so it's hard to tell what's what. But the rumor going around right now is that they paid $13 million for their latest roster, and because their transfer portal haul has been unbelievable. They got they got Will Howard, they got the Ole Miss running back Judkins, is that his name? So they basically got the number 1 running back, the number 1 quarterback. They got the cornerback from Alabama, Caleb Downs, who he was basically the freshman All-American, one of the best players in the country.
Yeah.
So they picked up all those guys, but they paid. They're clearly investing all of this, and they now have this kind of patchwork thing coming together. So I don't know. It'll be interesting which of these wins out, because I guess as you look at Michigan, he built that team. Those were all his guys. He built a very strong line. He built very strong, those guys played on the team for 2-3 years before they finally won, and they made it to 2 playoffs before finally winning. So that's where I'm kind of how do you strike that balance of keeping roster continuity for 2 to 3 years while also being okay, now we can go out and get the top transfer guy and spend Ohio State money to get the best running back in the country type thing. I don't know. It's a hard balance to strike. I think all these coaches can't figure it out. And I also think it's why Harbaugh left. I think it's why Saban retired. I think they just don't want to deal with it. It's mayhem.
Saban literally said it. He was like, no, I'm done.
It's like it's
like my
mayhem.
energy is gone.
Well, it's like every player on your roster is transferring every year is like complete chaos.
It's wild to see. Like, I don't want to give him any more attention than ESPN gives him, which is countless hours of our and countless brain cells. But Colorado, they have eight freshmen coming in.
Yeah,
8. Their freshman class is less than a third the size of Nebraska's. And so we're literally taking opposite approaches. I mean that.
Well, he has the number 1 transfer portal class.
Exactly. Yeah. So they have a huge transfer class. They're just gonna shell out money for players that they've seen play in college, and the rest are just they got one terrific 5-star recruit, and then they got 7 okay recruits. They got eight recruits.
Yeah,
that's crazy to see these other teams around us that are doing, basically things the traditional way. Like Georgia, I'm just looking at the commitment totals. Georgia 28, Alabama 28, Oregon 26. We are in the mid 20s too. So is Miami. So is LSU has 29, Oklahoma 27. I mean, and then Colorado's 8. So they're taking a completely different approach.
But it's also, it's
paying and shelling out for players.
It's so freaking blatant what he's doing. I feel like if you really read through to like the true Colorado fans, they're like, this guy's leaving. It's so obvious, like that he's on this like 2-year path to win games.
Don't tell Colorado fans that.
They're the ones.
Colorado fans convinced that he's there for 10 years.
Well, but I think if you read through, I've seen enough message board stuff come out that like the true Colorado fan is like, he is very clearly trying to win right now while his son is still there. Yeah, while his son is still there, he'll be there 2 to 3 years until his son leaves, which is basically next year. And he needs, he went and got 5 transfers and all this stuff, and he wants to win right now, which, if that's what happens, great. But when he leaves, holy cow. I mean, they're going to have literally no players. It's going to be crazy.
I'm going to laugh so hard.
Yeah, it's nuts. But no, I don't know which one. I don't know which work, but next year is going to be crazy. I mean, I was pulling up some of our games for next year. It's going to be so nuts to see how these guys do with UCLA and USC on our roster or on our schedule for next year.
Yeah.
And Colorado.
And Colorado.
Yep. But yeah, I think, the way that everybody's starting to look at it now, and I'm sure we're going to dive into this forever over the next 9 months, but those first 7 games, UTEP, Colorado, Northern Iowa, Illinois, Purdue, Rutgers, Indiana. What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
I can't believe we're going to start 7-0. I really can't.
7-0, and then you head into the $13 million roster of Ohio State. Not good, but then UCLA, USC.
Is anyone going to score a point on Tony White? Speaking of offseason title-winning moves, God, signing Tony White is just incredible. But,
yeah, Trev took out the pocketbook on that one.
Yeah.
It's going to be a super interesting year. But I think we're definitely off to a hot start here in the offseason. I think it's a lot of good stuff.
Yep, we're going to be bringing podcast every other week or so until this thing is really revving up. And then we're, God, I just can't believe spring ball's almost here already.
Spring ball's here. We'll ramp up the content. That'll be good times.
That's so awesome.
And then we're back. Best time of year.
Yes.
All right, folks. Thanks everybody for listening. Go Big Red. Have a great rest of your weekend. We'll talk to you guys here in probably another couple weeks. Let's go Big Red.
Yeah.